Welcome back to Chasers, the season finale of Chasers. The season finale of Chasers. I'm confident, in fact, I'm confident in telling you that this entire series, I know I haven't always been as sure, is about collectible cards from the 1990s. And for season one, we've been making our way through my own personal collection that I bought back in the 90s. And if you listen to last episode, later than that. But not much has changed since last episode, since we left off in 1993. And that's because 1994 was basically the year for that. Everything comic book was contracting, even if not everybody knew it just yet. And that includes Marvel, who business-wise was still acting pretty bullish. Even in late 1994, that was when they bought one of their comic distributors, Heroes World Distribution. It was quite the debacle that you can read about. But the idea at the time was that they could vertically integrate some, and I mention that because they basically did the same thing about 2 years earlier in 1992 when they bought Fleer for $540 million, just to give you an idea of how booming business still was at the time. And Fleer was yet another very old confectionery company like Topps, Donruss, and Skybox that had kind of inadvertently created the collectible card market by packing them in with their candies and cigarettes. In fact, I just read this, that the idea originally was just to include kind of semi-rigid pieces of cardboard so the cigarettes wouldn't bend, I guess, and then they started printing stuff on them and etc. So Marvel bought Fleer in 1992, but their contract with Impel, or Skybox now, wasn't up until 1994. So this was about to be the first year that they printed the cards in-house, as it were, if you just went out and bought the house, essentially. So it's probably no coincidence that there was a changing of the guard that was going on when it came to card production. And I say probably because I am still piecing a lot of this stuff together. There's no one good article with a big fat timeline that I'm just regurgitating for you. So I will, number one, list all of the sources I've used for this entire season in the show notes below. But also I need to shout out a couple people. Most recently, Comic Book Historian on YouTube. I found an interview with Tom Brevoort on there. It's like 3 hours long, but it's great, especially if you're interested in some of the behind the scenes at Marvel. But one of the tidbits, especially pertinent to this program, is that he did say there was a, quote, bit of a battle for control for the trading card division. And I gotta be honest, I think Tom and Bob Budiansky, if you remember, those are two of kind of the key players here over in the special projects division at Marvel. I think they lost that battle because, as I understand it, they were both kind of shuffled off to work on Spider-Man books at that point. In fact, Bob Budiansky as EIC, although that apparently only lasted about a year, and then that entire team was let go. This was around the time of the clone storyline. I don't know if that had anything to do about it, but the only person who survived, and I think maybe his assistant at the time, was Tom Brevoort, who is, again, still at Marvel. But at the time, there was a guy over at Fleer who, I'm going to guess, possibly, again, came with the Fleer purchase by the name of Bill Jemas, and a divisive figure, I gather, but by the end of the year, he was also executive VP over at Marvel itself. So he brought in a guy by the name of Dan Buckley, who I think had been bouncing around Marvel since the 80s anyway, but made him business unit director over trading cards, and then hired a guy by the name of Michael Pasciullo, the late Michael Pasciullo, I believe, as assistant marketing manager. And those are at least two of the possibly six, I'm sure more people that showed up. I also saw talk of Jim Boyle, Steve Domzalski, Ben Plavin, Ron Perazza, and Jennifer Caudill, a female. And they, it seems, basically took the reins. There might have been some overlap, again, piecing some of this stuff together, but I'm going to guess not much, honestly. Because when it comes to the actual cards themselves, they do look a bit different. And we're talking about, if I haven't mentioned it already, Marvel Universe Series 5 if you're on the internet, but Marvel Universe 1994 if you're looking at literally any of the print. Either way you slice it, they do look a bit different than I think, and not just from the previous year, but I think from just about anything we've seen so far. Nothing dramatic going to the cards now. You can see they're basically still, comic book characters, and storylines is one of the additions. Some cool variations on some themes, but for the most part, you're going to recognize what you're seeing, except these are nice and glossy. If I took one out, you could tell. In foil embossed, anytime there's any text or graphics of any kind, just nice gold foil. And I don't think that's in any small part due to the fact that you're going to see for the first time on the back, if you can see it, the Fleer name. No skybox, no impel, obviously. Fleer is here to stay. And the other thing you can absolutely see from any distance is that this collection is incomplete. So this is exactly where I had the idea to do this series. Evelyn and I were going through this pack by pack after doing series 4. And I think for that reason, I'm going to save most of my commentary until we are done with the set. If we can finish the set. I've got the box still, obviously. I did the math. I've got 20 packs left, 9 cards per pack, so that's 180 cards left to unwrap. I have 90 cards left in the set to go, so not including chase cards, obviously, which we'll get to. I know that probably sounds like my odds are pretty good, but my guess is I'll be pretty much right where they wanted me back in 1994, which is just a few cards away from completing the set, just going in on pack after pack until I did so. But luckily, I cannot do that at this point in time for several reasons. The first being when I bought this box to start collecting this set, I got away with it at like a little over $50, I think. And this is one of the best ironies of the show, is that since then, the market exploded. Apparently there was some parallel thought going on there, because I was not the only one with the idea. And now these very boxes, like, don't even get me started on series 1, 2, or 3, but series 5 here is going for $250, $300 on eBay. So we'll see. The truth is, it'll probably depend on patronage at that point. So if you want to see me complete this set, go visit Patreon or PayPal and let me know. But for 1994, I could not actually tell you how well the cards sold, especially compared to other years. I did see some stuff that quite possibly they saw a little bit of a bump because there was actually a Major League Baseball strike going on at the time. So I guess some shops had just, in the place of baseball cards, put comic book cards on the shelves instead. I don't know how, I literally don't know, but I also theoretically don't know how much significant sell-through that would have resulted in. I can see maybe the speculators who hadn't entirely dropped off at this point, I'm sure, didn't have any allegiance one way or the other, maybe bought some comic book cards instead. Kids, there was probably some crossover. I just don't know how often somebody would go into a store looking for baseball cards and just be like, oh, I guess I'll buy comic book cards instead. I don't know. I can tell you this, though. Just from what I have in front of me as I continue to go through the cards here. Again, I do release this as a podcast, and I hope for the most part it does work. This is probably the portion where podcast listeners, I apologize to some extent, but let me tell you, these cards are very nice. Maybe just coming from Series 4 especially, but again, I think from what we've seen just all together, any episode of this series so far, these are good looking cards, back to front. And by that I mean probably the flashiest cards we've done so far. And again, we'll get into the actual art and the artists, maybe a bit about the layout, I think, both as we open up more packs, but also as we hopefully complete the set. But if you really want to see what's going on, you don't have to look any farther than the chase cards. They have more and more types than ever before. These are the suspended animation cards. You can kind of see they're clear there. They were, I guess, promoting the animated series at the time, which pretty sure was in its 3rd season. Then they also have Power Blast cards, which kind of look like the reflective they were doing for the Marvel Masterpieces, actually. And I would think these were more premium than even the suspended animation cards, but I ended up with more Power Blast cards than anything. So I'm not complaining. I mean, 90s Ryan is happy to take advantage of all of your shiny things, put them in front of my face, exploit me. And I think I pulled some pretty good ones too, honestly. These are, I think, the Power Blast cards, there are 9. So altogether, I'm not doing too bad here. How many was that? I know the 1-touch cases is probably overkill here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of 9 already, and no repeats. 2 of 10 suspended animation cards, and actually got 1 of the 4 holograms, if I can get that. There we go. That's not bad. So, and they went like a Marvel Series 1 style with these, where there's just like nothing on the back. So there's supposedly some, I think with the Power Blast cards too, there's like a tint that is dependent on where they were made or sold. I have yet to be able to, like, let's just with the hologram itself, it says there are 3 variants: red/dark orange, green/gold, and green/blue. Can you even, like, I want to say green, but that's red. That's green. I have no idea. And the same with these Power Blasts. Apparently there's a rainbow and I don't know. The point being, multiple types of chase cards, multiple variants on the types, and just, again, I'm halfway through the box and this is what I've pulled so far. So it seems like the odds maybe had increased as well. So the cards weren't immune to any of the bloat going on in the comic book industry at the time, maybe in microcosm, but this also is just one set, just the one set that I have-ish from 1994. They also made more Spider-Man cards, more Marvel Masterpieces, Marvel Annual Flair cards. I always thought it was weird that Fleer did a Flair set, but that was like a completely separate thing. And Ultra Marvel X-Men cards, which I actually did buy a couple packs back in 94 and stuck them in the back here. And they're at least as nice. Again, with the embossed and the artwork and the design, it's all next level stuff. I don't mean to imply at any point that Fleer did not know what they were doing. But again, real flashy, very nice. So they were still at the very least continuing the course from previous years, maybe still kind of testing the limits of what they could get away with in the market. And honestly, I think they might have found it, because maybe the biggest indicator of how well or well enough the cards sold in 1994 is that this is basically the last Marvel Universe set. 1995 did see another Marvel Flair series, which again was a bit of a universe series, so it would make sense that, although, you know, I would have just continued the original series. But again, with the changing of the guard, that might have been kind of the plan from the start. We're going to retire what's been done, and our series, our Marvel Flair series, is going to take the lead. But this was also the year they introduced the Marvel Metal series of cards, which I don't know that I've said this a single time, and I'm probably not being very generous in doing it now, but not a fan, necessarily speaking, of those cards. And of course, there was another Marvel Masterpieces in 1995. Again, that's easily the most enduring series of cards that came out of this era. But even that ended just 2 years later in 1996. But I'm not going to dwell on the Dark Ages, actually. I think comics arguably have bounced back and are weathering the digital storm just fine. But in a way, trading cards, especially as I knew it, there's going to be a lot of as I knew it going on here, never came back. And part of that's because the hobby is just completely different. You know, it's almost an apples to oranges thing. So skip the rest of this if you want. But when I first started diving back into research for, again, I had this idea that, oh, this must still be going on. I can find whatever the current series of Marvel cards are, start buying boxes of those, and my daughter and I can have a grand old time. I just didn't recognize what was going on in the least. And maybe the best example of that is that in 2016, which is, again, already 10 years ago, just about from right now, Upper Deck, who had acquired the Fleer name in 2005 when they basically filed for bankruptcy, they had Joe Jusko back to do another Marvel Masterpieces, and every single one is just outstanding, just gorgeous, just out of this world. I love every single one of them, but gone are the days of 350,000, mass market boxes full of 36 packs, 6 cards per pack, which was already kind of premium. For the smaller sets like X-Men, they only went up to 100. Yes, the packs themselves, although not different in price, I don't remember, did only have 6 or 8 cards, something like that. I think there was 12 in the Universe series of cards, so fine. But compare that to 2016, where you're buying a box. And again, this comes after an 8-year hiatus. Series 8 was in 2008, so not a return to form in any sense of the word, but especially in the sense that each box was going to run you about $175 for 12 packs with just 3 cards each inside. So 36 cards for a 90 card set, which, yes, you weren't guaranteed to complete a set even with, buying a box back in the day. It was more possible, but it's literally impossible with this. And again, they are outstanding. They're each, I believe, in fact, numbered. So you might be getting, depending, I can actually forget, I'm not going to explain it. They might as well come pre-slabbed, essentially. They're just very obviously for hardcore collectors. And that is fantastic. And it's a bummer. It's both things and can be, much like Marvel, can also be both things. And I need to shout out once again the article on sketched.com, SKTCHED. Again, these are going to be all down in the description. For their article, The Secret Origin and Lasting Impact of the Marvel Universe Cards. I turned to this article a lot during this series, but when the writer David Harper asks Tom Brevoort in 2014, so been a while, but still, when he asked him about current trading card efforts at the company, Tom said, quote, "I do think we have deals to do trading cards of one sort or another." So not a terribly encouraging thing to hear from an executive editor and senior VP at Marvel, even if it is just not his department anymore. But it's because Marvel, to say it's a lot bigger than it used to be, probably does not do it justice. The licensing and publishing departments are their own behemoths, bifurcated, in Tom Brevoort's words, like the rest of the company. So the stars just were not aligned like they were in the 90s. And this is exactly where I found myself just over 3 years ago now, when I pulled up my chair to this very desk and thought I'd talk about how Evelyn and I were opening up just a bunch of packs from this box here, and maybe I'd make a video about it or something. So that's going to be season 2 of Chasers. It's just going to be Evelyn and I going through a 30-year-old pack of cards and seeing what we get. And I've got a fresh box of X-Men Series 2 for a season, and DC's Cosmic Cards for another, and Star Trek. These are really cheap. And I'm hoping to make it a weekly thing, which is going to take probably some filming in advance, not to mention some scheduling around other shows like Tetris Tuesdays, which is on Tuesdays. I'm thinking this will probably be on Wednesday, and then cinematic Thursday or Friday, depending. So it's not going to be next week, but it will hopefully be every week, and it will, again, probably depend a bit on patronage. Hint, hint. But I don't want to end on that note. I want to end with a big thank you to all the creators that made this series of videos and these cards possible. You had an impact on my life and my work, roughly in that order, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So, thank you.